The USB drive. It was a night like any other when I found it. The small, unassuming object that would turn my world upside down. I was running late for work, as usual, and decided to take the shortcut behind the old industrial buildings. It was a path I'd taken 100 times before, though I never felt entirely comfortable walking there. The decaying warehouses, the abandoned machinery left to rot, and the crumbling cement walls always felt off. There was something about the stillness, like the air itself had been thickened by years of neglect. That's when I saw it. Lying in the dirt wedged between two pieces of shattered concrete was a small black USB drive. No label, no logo, just a glossy black rectangle, reflecting the faint glow of the nearby street lamp. It was as if it had been dropped only moments ago, but there was no one around. I bent down, almost instinctively, and picked it up. The cold metal sent a shiver up my spine. I glanced around, but no one was there. No one had seen me find it. The decision seemed so trivial at the time. I slipped it into my pocket and hurried home, trying to shake off the nagging feeling that I was being watched. That evening, I sat at my desk after dinner, a faint unease lingering in my mind. The night was still young, and I had no real plans. My fingers brushed the USB drive in my pocket, pulling it out and placing it on the desk in front of me. I stared at it for a moment. It was strange. Not the kind of thing you find just lying around. I couldn't understand why someone would throw it away, or why it felt so important. There was something magnetic about it. Something wrong. I plugged it into my laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. I waited, the seconds dragging on as the drive remained unresponsive. And then, as if on cue, the screen flickered and a folder appeared on my desktop. It was labeled DO /_ not / break / the / rules. My heart skipped a beat. Who would name something like that? It was a warning, but a ridiculous one. My fingers hovered over the mouse, but hesitation crept in. I don't know why I felt this way. It wasn't like I believed in curses or supernatural warnings. But the folder, the name, it all felt wrong. I double-clicked. Inside, there were 7 text files, each labeled rule1.txt, rule2.txt, and so on, with a final file named consequences.txt. I couldn't stop myself. I had to open the first one. Rule 1 asterisk. Asterisk, once you open this file, the rules have begun. At exactly 3 a.m., you must turn off all lights and electronics. You must remain silent for 60 seconds. Do not look outside. Do not answer your phone. Do not make a sound. If you fail to follow this, something will come for you. Something you cannot unsee. Asterisk. I sat back in my chair, reading the file again. And again, it sounded absurd. There was no way something so ridiculous could be real. It was a prank, a joke, an elaborate, sick joke. I should have ejected the drive, tossed it aside, and walked away. But instead, I stared at the screen, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I just read. At that moment, a gust of wind rattled the windows, pulling me from my thoughts. The storm had worsened outside, the sound of rain lashing against the glass growing louder. I glanced at the clock, 11:52 p.m. 10 minutes until midnight. 10 minutes until whatever this was would become real. I tried to shake the thought, but the feeling in the pit of my stomach grew. The unease, the feeling that someone was watching me. I didn't want to be foolish. It was just a computer file, after all. But then I thought of something. If I followed the rule, what would it hurt? It was harmless, right? The file was already on my computer, and it had said the rules had already begun. It was already too late to back out. So I waited. At exactly 3 a.m., I turned off my lights. My phone, my computer, everything went dark. The only sound was a heavy patter of rain against the windows, the wind whispering through cracks in the walls. The silence wrapped around me, suffocating. I sat motionless, staring into the dark, fighting every urge to move, to check my phone, to peek outside. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. The tension was unbearable, each passing moment more intense than the last. I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I broke the rule. What was something that I couldn't unsee? A feeling settled in my chest, a cold, creeping dread. I wasn't alone. I knew it before I heard it. The creak of floorboards behind me. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. My heart thundered in my chest as I stayed perfectly still, trying not to breathe. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, moving slowly, deliberately. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more absurd than the last. I couldn't look. I couldn't move. And then a low, raspy whisper, almost a sigh, came from the corner of the room. Asterisk, asterisk, you're not supposed to be here. Asterisk, asterisk. It was so soft, so chilling, that I nearly jumped out of my skin. The breath I had been holding finally escaped my lips as a shudder ran down my spine. The whisper wasn't a voice I recognized, but somehow it felt familiar, like it had always been there, waiting. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath. The lights flickered once, twice, but I didn't dare move. A heavy silence followed, and then it was gone. When the clock struck 3:01 a.m., the lights came back on. The coldness vanished. The room seemed to return to normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still there just out of sight, waiting, watching. I looked down at the USB drive on my desk. It was no longer plugged into my laptop. It was sitting neatly in the center of the desk, facing me. And then my phone vibrated, and a message appeared on the screen. You followed Rule 1. You're safe. For now. I picked up the drive, my hands trembling. The sense of dread was suffocating, but I knew I had no choice. The rules had already begun, and there were 6 more to follow. The second rule, the clock on my desk, blinked in the stillness of the room. 3:13 a.m. The silence that followed the whisper was almost unbearable. The cold from earlier had finally faded, but the unease hadn't. In fact, it had deepened, clinging to me like a second skin. I sat in the same spot, staring at the cursed USB drive now sitting neatly in front of me. Its dark plastic surface reflected the dim light from my desk lamp. It almost looked expectant, as if it were waiting for me to make the next move. I was trying to convince myself that it had all been a product of my imagination. Maybe the wind had caused the creaking of the floorboards. Maybe my mind had played tricks on me with the whisper. I had spent years convincing myself that anything supernatural was nothing more than fantasy, but after the night, I wasn't so sure. I didn't know what to do. My heart was still racing, and the air felt thick, like the pressure before a storm. The message on my phone, the one that claimed I was safe for now, did nothing to calm me. I grabbed the USB drive, hesitating only for a second before I plugged it back into my laptop. The screen flickered and the folder appeared again. DO /_ not / break / to / rules. This time, the first file, rule2.txt, was open before I could even click it. The words were already there, waiting. Rule 2 *. Asterisk at exactly 7 a.m. You must step outside and walk to the edge of your property. Do not look behind you. Do not make any sudden movements. If you hear footsteps, you must keep walking. Do not stop, even if it feels like something is following you. If you stop, something will take you, and you will never return. If you follow this rule, you will be safe for now. Asterisk. I closed my eyes, trying to process what I had just read. Walk outside at 7 a.m.? Don't look behind me? What kind of sick game was this? I looked at the clock on my laptop. 3:16 a.m. I had 4 hours to go. But something in me, something primal, was already stirring. I couldn't explain it, but I had a feeling that this was no joke, that this drive wasn't some prank. And the rules? They weren't just words on a screen. They were a warning. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. How could I, after what had happened? The thought of following another rule terrified me, but I knew I had no choice. This wasn't something I could just walk away from. I stayed awake, pacing around my apartment. My eyes kept darting toward the door, toward the dark hallway that led to the small balcony at the back of my apartment. Every time I thought I saw something in the corner of my vision, my heart skipped a beat. I tried to shake it off, tell myself it was nothing, but the doubt kept growing. I checked my phone. 4:30 a.m. Still 2.5 hours to go. I sat back down at my desk, staring at the USB drive again. It was strange. Why was I so afraid? Why did I feel like I had no other choice but to obey the rules? It wasn't like me to act this way. As the minutes dragged on, I tried to focus on anything other than the rules, but it was impossible. The house felt different now, colder somehow, even though the temperature hadn't changed. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumbles of thunder, the quiet ticking of my clock on the wall. It was as if my own apartment was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The second the clock hit 6:45 a.m., I stood up. I knew I had no time to waste. Whatever this was, it was real. I had no way of escaping it. I grabbed my jacket and slipped it on. The morning was still dark outside, the rain from the night before leaving the air thick and damp. The world seemed suspended in time. The second I stepped outside, I felt it, the weight of something watching me, not from the apartment, but from beyond, from the very edge of my property. The feeling crawled up my spine like 1,000 tiny insects. I could sense it, the same thing I felt last night when I'd heard the whisper. It was here, too. I kept walking, the chill of the morning air biting at my skin. My shoes slapped against the pavement with each step. The street was empty as expected, the houses around me dark and still. I tried to ignore the feeling growing in my chest. Something was wrong, but I pushed it down. 7 a.m. I reached the edge of my property. The trees across the street looked far off in the gray mist. Everything seemed silent, too silent. And then footsteps. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. The footsteps weren't mine. They were coming from behind me, slow, deliberate. They mirrored my own pace, almost like they were keeping time with me. My body screamed at me to turn around, to run, to do anything but keep walking. But the rule, it said not to look behind me, not to make any sudden movements. I had to keep going. I fought my instincts and walked faster, pushing my legs to move faster than they wanted. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Every time I thought they might stop, they didn't. They followed me just a step behind. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, and I felt it. The presence, something that had been waiting for me. I kept walking, my breath quickening, my feet pounding against the pavement, and the footsteps never stopped. They were right there, behind me. I couldn't tell if it was a person, a thing, but I could feel it, a presence. Too close. I had to move faster, faster. But as I reached the end of my property, the footsteps suddenly stopped. I stopped too. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. My body jerked around, my heart hammering in my chest. There was nothing behind me, just empty space. Nothing but the trees, the mist, the silence. I stood there, breathing heavily, sweat clinging to my back. I had followed the rule. I was safer now. But I knew one thing for sure. Whatever had been following me, whatever I had felt, was still there. And it wasn't done with me yet. I turned and made my way back inside, the USB drive still waiting on my desk. The message blinked on my phone as I entered. You followed Rule 2. You're safe. For now. But I wasn't sure what that really meant anymore. The third rule. I sat back in my chair, staring at the phone, my hands trembling. The screen blinked again, a faint buzzing sound coming from the device, as if to remind me that the rules were still in play. You followed Rule 2. You're safe. For now. The words were hollow. Safe? How could I be safe when I had just walked into the morning mist, pursued by an unseen presence? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just waiting for the right moment to claim me, when I'd least expect it. I glanced around the room, the walls closing in. Everything was too quiet, too still. The usual hum of the city outside seemed muffled, as if the world was holding its breath. I couldn't explain it, but something had shifted. The phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message. It was the arrival of Rule 3. I clicked on the notification, dreading what I would find. A part of me wished I could stop, could ignore this entire nightmare. But the other part, the part that feared breaking the rules, pushed me forward. Rule 3 asterisk. Asterisk at exactly 10 a.m. You must go to your bathroom and stare into the mirror for 1 full minute. Do not look away. Do not blink. If you do, you will see something in the reflection that should not be there. It will be the last thing you ever see. Asterisk. I felt a coldness run through my veins as I read the words. This was escalating quickly. First, I was simply following directions, walking outside, doing what I was told. But now it was different. Staring into a mirror? Not blinking? This wasn't a game anymore. I had already come this far, but what if I couldn't complete this one? I looked at the clock. 9:15 a.m. I had a whole 45 minutes to prepare for whatever twisted task awaited me. I couldn't think straight. I paced around my apartment, wringing my hands. The clock ticked loudly in the background, counting down the seconds to my next torment. I tried to distract myself. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, but the feeling of being watched, of something just beyond the edge of my awareness, never left. I went into the kitchen, making myself some coffee to steady my nerves. The hot liquid burned my tongue, but it did little to ease the panic building in my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about the mirror. What if I looked away? What if I blinked? I didn't want to know what would happen. As the clock ticked closer to 10 a.m., my anxiety grew. There was a part of me that wanted to run, to throw the USB drive into the trash and walk away from this nightmare. But I knew better. There was no escaping it now. I walked into the bathroom, staring at the small, rectangular mirror above the sink. The bathroom was dimly lit, the only light coming from the small window above the shower. The reflection staring back at me was that of a man who had barely slept, his face haggard and pale. My eyes were bloodshot, and my hair was a mess. It looked like I hadn't rested in days. I checked the clock on the wall. 9:58 a.m. 2 minutes to go. I stood in front of the mirror, forcing myself to take deep, even breaths. My hand shook slightly. I felt the temperature in the bathroom drop, whether from the cold outside or something else. I couldn't tell. The air felt thicker now, charged with some unexplainable tension. 9:59 a.m. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, the blood rushing through my veins as I stared at my reflection. The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. I couldn't look away. 10 a.m. I stared. My eyes never left the mirror, my entire body locked in place. The silence was deafening. 1 minute, 60 seconds. It felt like an eternity. At first, nothing happened. The reflection stared back at me, exactly as I expected. But then, it moved. My reflection didn't match my own movements. It tilted its head slightly to the left, as if curious, as if it were trying to read me. The chill in the room deepened, and my breath fogged up the mirror. My heart raced, and I felt my palms sweat. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection slightly out of sync. Maybe it was my nerves playing with me. But then it happened again. My reflection's lips curled into a smile that I didn't make. I tried to move, to look away, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as though something had taken hold of me, forcing my eyes to stay fixed on the mirror. My reflection leaned in closer, its smile widening, stretching unnaturally across its face. The eyes staring back at me were hollow, black voids, nothing like my own terrified eyes. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. The mirror seemed to consume everything around me, pulling me into its depths. The smile grew. The reflection reached out a hand, but it wasn't my hand. It was too long, the fingers too spindly, too inhuman. It pressed against the glass, its fingers leaving an oily, smudge-like mark as it continued to grin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I was frozen, paralyzed by the thing in the mirror. It started to speak, its voice a low, rasping whisper that echoed in my ears. "You shouldn't have looked away," it murmured. "You shouldn't have blinked." I wanted to shout, to tell it that I hadn't, that I'd kept my eyes open. But no sound came out. The thing in the mirror reached further, its hand scraping the surface of the glass. The edges of the mirror seemed to warp, bending inward, as if the very reflection was pulling me closer. My breath came in shallow gasps, and I felt the darkness of its gaze pulling at me. It pressed against the glass with more force, the reflection distorting, contorting as it began to step forward, its face moving closer to mine. No, I thought, my mind screaming, but my body remained motionless, unable to do anything. The cold sensation I felt earlier returned, wrapping around my chest like iron chains. And then, in a sudden rush of clarity, I saw it. A faint line of text appeared at the bottom of the mirror, written in the same eerie font as the rules. You followed Rule 3, but only just. You are safe for now. The reflection faded and my own image returned. The mirror returned to its usual state, normal, unremarkable. But the chill still lingered in the air, the sense of dread refusing to let go. I stumbled back, breathing heavily. My knees buckled as I leaned against the sink. I didn't know whether I should feel relief or terror. The rules were clear: follow them or suffer the consequences. But what had just happened? What was that thing in the mirror? And how much longer would I survive this twisted game? I pulled myself together and grabbed my phone. Another message blinked on the screen. You followed Rule 3. You're safe. For now. I wasn't sure if I believed it. But I knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The fourth rule. The air inside my apartment felt suffocating. Every breath I took seemed to fill my lungs with more dread than oxygen. I couldn't shake the image of the thing in the mirror, its twisted, mocking smile, the way it seemed to know exactly what I was thinking. I had barely processed what had happened when the screen of my phone flickered to life again. A new message. Rule 4. It had been less than an hour since the third rule, and already I was beginning to feel like I was losing control. But I had no choice. I had to keep following the rules. There was no turning back. Each rule brought me closer to some twisted, unknown end, but every step forward also meant survival for a little longer. I wiped the cold sweat off my forehead, forcing myself to open the message. Rule 4 asterisk. Asterisk at exactly 12 p.m. You must find an object that is deeply personal to you. Place it in the center of your living room. Stand there, looking at it, for 1 minute. During that time, you must not blink. You must not look away. If you do, the object will become a part of you. If it is not returned to its place within the next 24 hours, you will begin to lose everything you hold dear. You will forget who you are. You will forget your past. You will lose yourself. Asterisk. I read the text again, the weight of it pressing against me, suffocating me. An object deeply personal to me? What did that even mean? I thought about my things, my possessions, my life. There were countless objects in my apartment that held memories. But there was only one thing that stood out. The one thing that made me feel truly connected to myself. The old pocket watch. It had belonged to my grandfather. A worn, brass timepiece that had been passed down to me when I was a child. I always carried it with me. No matter what. Its ticking was a constant reminder of my roots, of where I came from. It was the one thing I always kept close. The one thing that felt like it defined me. I glanced at the clock on my desk. 11:35 a.m. Less than half an hour until I had to follow the rule. My heart raced at the thought of it. The idea of having to stand in front of the watch and stare at it for a full minute without blinking seemed insane. And yet, I couldn't ignore it. If I didn't follow this rule, there would be consequences. I had no idea what that would mean, but I had already learned the cost of defiance. I grabbed the watch from my drawer, the cold metal sending a shiver up my spine. It looked so ordinary, yet it felt wrong somehow, like it was part of something I couldn't understand. Something dark and twisted. The clock ticked down. 11:55 a.m. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, louder than the ticking of the watch. My mind raced as I tried to reason with myself. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. But there was no escaping it. Not now. I moved to the center of the living room, placing the pocket watch on the floor in front of me. It gleamed in the dim light, its surface reflecting the soft glow of the afternoon sun that filtered through the blinds. My hands shook as I stood up and stared at it, waiting for the clock to strike noon. 12 p.m. I stood there, staring down at the watch. The minute hand moved, slowly ticking forward, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't blink. The weight of the rule pressed heavily on me. The tension in the air palpable. It was almost unbearable. I could feel my eyes drying out, my lids starting to grow heavy. But I refused to blink. I had no choice. I couldn't. The silence was overwhelming. I counted the seconds, forcing myself to stay focused on a watch. It felt like time was dragging, each tick of the second hand louder than the last. The longer I stood there, the more I felt something strange beginning to happen. The watch seemed to pulse, its ticking almost synchronized with the beat of my heart. The air felt thicker, heavier. The room was growing darker, even though the sunlight was still streaming through the blinds. A cold, creeping chill was spreading across the floor, curling around my feet like tendrils of ice. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I could feel something shifting, something moving just beyond my vision, but I couldn't look away from the watch. It was like I was losing control of my own body. My eyes were straining, the muscles in my face aching, but I couldn't blink. My body felt stiff, my breathing shallow. But I didn't dare break the rule. And then, suddenly I heard it. A soft sound, almost like a whisper. It wasn't coming from behind me. It wasn't coming from the room at all. It was inside my head. The voice, so faint at first, almost drowned out by the ticking of the watch, grew louder with each passing second. Asterisk, look away, asterisk. It was a voice, but not mine, not anyone I recognized. Asterisk, look away, and you'll be free. Asterisk. My body screamed at me to move, to look away, but I couldn't. The voice was so convincing, so soothing. It promised freedom. It promised peace. But I knew better. I had already learned the price of breaking the rules. The watch began to tremble, its ticking growing frantic, its hands moving faster, almost out of control. The object was no longer just a timepiece. It was alive, it was pulsing, and its presence felt like a living thing. The glass face of the watch cracked slightly, just a hairline fracture, but the crack spread slowly across the surface. I could feel it, like the watch was tearing apart in front of me. I held my ground, unwilling to move, unwilling to break. The seconds stretched on. The voice continued to grow louder in my mind, a growing whisper urging me to stop, to give in. But then, the minute ended. The watch stopped trembling. The crack in its glass stopped spreading. For a moment, everything was still. I blinked. Once. Twice. I looked at the watch, half expecting something to leap out of it, to attack me. But nothing happened. It was just a pocket watch again, sitting harmlessly on the floor, the hands frozen at 12:01. The room felt normal. Too normal. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I checked my phone, heart pounding, desperate for some sign that I had done it right, that I was safe. The message popped up. You followed Rule 4. You're safe. For now. But even as I read the words, I felt a creeping sense of unease. It didn't feel like I was safe. It felt like I had crossed a line, like something deep within me had changed. What was the price of losing yourself? I couldn't shake the question. And I knew deep down it wasn't over yet. The fifth rule, I woke up with a jolt, my heart pounding against my ribs. The dream, or whatever it was, had been vivid, unsettling. I couldn't remember it fully, just fragments of darkness and distant whispers. But one thing was clear. I wasn't sleeping well anymore. The fear, the anxiety, had followed me into my dreams. I hadn't been able to escape it for days. The clock on my nightstand read 7:25 a.m. It was still early, but I had learned by now that time didn't matter when you were caught in this nightmare. The moment I sat up in bed, I felt it, asterisk the present star. It was as if the shadows themselves were waiting, watching, waiting for me to make a wrong move. The phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look at it to know what it was. The message had come. Rule 5. The next part of this twisted game, the next step in whatever nightmare I was trapped in. I reached for the phone with shaking hands, trying to steady my nerves. I opened the message and braced myself for what was to come. Rule 5 asterisk. Asterisk at exactly 2 p.m. You must go to your front door. You must open it and step outside for exactly 10 seconds. During that time, you must not look away from the door. If you look behind you, if you turn around, you will see something that will haunt you forever, and it will be waiting for you when you return. Do not attempt to close the door, before the time is up. If you do, the consequences will be irreversible. Asterisk. I stared at the screen, my stomach sinking. It sounded so simple. Just open the door, stand there for 10 seconds, and don't turn around. But something told me it wasn't that simple. Nothing about this was simple. I already knew what happened when you broke the rules. I had seen the consequences. The fear had etched itself into my bones. The clock on my wall ticked ominously, the seconds dragging on. 9:00 a.m. I had 5 hours to prepare, but I couldn't prepare for this. There was no preparing for something like this. How could I? The rules were relentless, unyielding. Every time I thought I understood, I realized I didn't know anything at all. I tried to push away the panic that was rising in my chest. I tried to go about my day, to eat something, to drink water, but nothing felt right. The weight of the rule hung over me like a shadow. Its presence as real as the walls of my apartment. Every sound in the apartment was amplified. Every creak, every rustle of the air, every tick of the clock seemed too loud. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just waiting for the right moment to strike. The walls of my apartment had never felt so close, so suffocating. 2:00 p.m. I looked at the clock. The moment had arrived. I walked to the door, my legs heavy, as if each step was dragging me into something I couldn't escape. The door was ordinary, nothing special. It had been there as long as I had lived here. But as my hand touched the knob, I felt the weight of the rules settle over me. I opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking, the air outside cool and damp against my skin. The sunlight outside was muted, as if something had cast a shadow over the entire world. I stepped out onto the small, concrete landing that led to the stairs below. The street was quiet. The sky above was gray and lifeless, the clouds hanging low, pressing down on the city. For a moment, everything seemed still, eerily still. I stood there, my feet rooted to the ground, staring at the door in front of me. My eyes never wavered from it. It was all I could focus on. The silence around me was thick, suffocating. I didn't dare look away. The rule was clear. I had to follow it. I felt the breeze against my skin, felt the weight of the air pressing in around me. My heartbeat was a constant thrum in my chest, louder than anything else. I tried to steady my breathing, but it wasn't working. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to look behind me, to turn around and see what was there, to see what was waiting. But I couldn't. The clock on my phone beeped. 10 seconds. I quickly slammed the door shut, my hand trembling as the lock clicked into place. The silence that followed was deafening. My heart was still racing, but I had followed the rule. I was safe. For now. But when I turned around, my stomach dropped. The hallway in my apartment had changed. The walls were darker. The air felt heavier, denser, like the very foundation of the building had shifted. The shadows stretched unnaturally, curling into the corners of the room. I could feel something watching me, something just out of sight, but I couldn't look. I couldn't let myself break the rule. I moved slowly, my footsteps echoing through the darkened hall. Every part of me screamed to run, but I fought it. I forced myself to walk at a steady pace, to ignore the creeping feeling of dread in my chest. I had to follow the rules. That was the only way I would survive. But as I reached the living room, I felt it. The temperature in the room had dropped. A draft blew through the room, though no windows were open. The light from the lamp on the desk flickered, casting long, unnatural shadows on the walls. The shadows seemed to move, shifting in ways they shouldn't have. The space seemed to grow smaller, the corners closing in, as if something was pushing in from all sides. I reached the center of the room and stopped, my heart hammering in my chest. The room had never felt so oppressive. I felt like I was being swallowed by the darkness, by the weight of it. And then I saw it. In the farthest corner of the room, just barely visible in the dim light, something stood. I couldn't make out the details, but I could feel it. Its presence was suffocating. It was watching me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But the rule said not to look away. It was standing perfectly still. But I knew, asterisk a new star. The sixth rule. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stood frozen in the middle of my own apartment. The place that had once felt safe now transformed into a cage. The thing in the corner hadn't moved. It hadn't spoken. But its presence filled the entire room like a black fog, pressing down on me, crawling into my lungs. It was like staring at a shadow that stared back, without eyes, without a face, yet fully aware. It didn't need to move to terrify me. After what felt like hours, I blinked, and it was gone, just like that. No sound, no flash, no retreating footsteps. The thing in the corner had vanished as if it had never been there. But I knew better. Something had been here. Something had followed me back inside. And even though it was no longer in sight, I knew it hadn't truly left. My phone buzzed. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know. But I had to. Rule 6 asterisk. Asterisk tonight at exactly 11:11 p.m. You must draw a door on the wall closest to where you sleep. Use red ink, paint, or anything that can bleed. You must knock on the drawn door 3 times, then go to sleep without saying a word or turning around. You must not acknowledge any sounds, voices, or movement. If something opens the door during the night, do not wake up. If you wake up, it will come through. And once it's through, it stays forever. Asterisk. I dropped the phone. My blood turned cold. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't just terror. This was invasion. Whatever was behind the rules was getting closer. It was bleeding into my life, into my space, into my mind. And this new instruction wasn't just some creepy ritual. It was a direct invitation to something I didn't want to meet. I picked up the phone again, reading the rule over and over. It was so specific. Red ink, a door, 3 knocks, then silence, sleep, no response, no reaction. But what if I did react? What if I woke up? Would it tear through? Would it take me? Or worse, would it stay? The hours passed in a haze. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus, couldn't even look at the wall next to my bed without picturing the door I'd be forced to draw. I didn't even know what kind of ink to use. I didn't know anything red, no markers, no paint, no pens. I considered blood. Just the thought made my stomach turn. But as if the rules had anticipated the need, a small red marker sat neatly at my doorstep at 7 p.m. No packaging, no note, just there, waiting. I stared at it, horrified. Who left it? How did they know? I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't shared the rules, not even once. And yet, the marker had appeared, perfectly timed, like the next piece of a puzzle I never agreed to solve. I took it inside with trembling fingers. The weight of it felt wrong. Too cold, too heavy, like it carried something inside beyond ink. 10:45 p.m. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. Every few seconds, I glanced at the marker in my hand. My body was shaking, my breath short and shallow. The apartment was too quiet, too still, not even the hum of the refrigerator. It was as if everything around me was preparing for what was to come. 11:10 p.m. My heart hammered in my chest. I stood, walked to the wall, and with shaking hands, began to draw. A door. It didn't have to be perfect, just a shape, the idea of a door. But the moment the red marker touched the wall, the light in my room dimmed. I didn't touch the switch. It dimmed on its own. The color of the marker spread deeper than I intended, like it had a mind of its own. It bled too easily, too thick. I finished the door just as the clock turned to 11:11 p.m. And then I knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed strangely, not like a knock on drywall. No, it sounded like wood. Heavy, hollow wood. The kind of knock that resonated far too deeply from a surface that shouldn't exist. I backed away, climbed into bed, and lay down with the covers pulled up to my chest. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I didn't look at the wall. And then the waiting began. The first hour was silence. A thick, unnatural quiet that made my ears ring. I kept my eyes closed, willing myself to stay still. But every part of me was straining, listening, waiting for something to happen. It didn't take long. Around 12:03 a.m., I heard it. 3 knocks. Back. On the same wall I had drawn on. I stopped breathing. I knew without a doubt. Something was on the other side now. Something had answered. Then came the sound of groaning, slow, reluctant, like a door was being opened from the other side. The sound of air shifting, of something stepping in. My bed creaked slightly, like the pressure in the room had changed. I felt in my chest a weight like a second atmosphere. The air grew thick. I could taste it. Copper. Ash. Damp earth. A voice whispered, so faint I couldn't make out the words. It wasn't human. It didn't need to be. I clenched my eyes shut tighter, biting my tongue to keep from gasping. Whatever was in the room now, it wanted acknowledgement. That was the trap. I could feel it standing at the foot of my bed, watching. I heard the slow sound of breath, something breathing in and out, steady, but wrong, wet, uneven. I could feel it watching me, as though my closed eyes didn't matter, as if it could see through skin, through thought. I don't know how long it stood there. Minutes? Hours? But eventually the weight lifted. The air cleared. I must have fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion, because when I opened my eyes, sunlight was pouring through the blinds. My bed was cold, my body stiff, but I was alive. And the wall, the door I had drawn in red marker, gone, vanished. No ink, no stains, nothing. But on the floor at the base of the wall was something I hadn't left there. A key, small, black, cold. Attached to it was a tag that simply read, "The 7th rule." The black key sat at the base of the wall, glinting faintly in the morning light. It looked ancient, flat, rusted, and cold to the touch, even though the room had warmed with the sun. I didn't want to touch it, but I had to. I bent down slowly and picked it up. The second I did, I felt something shift in the air, subtle but undeniable, like some door, somewhere, had been unlocked just by my fingers closing around the key. I stared at it for what felt like an hour, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then my phone lit up. Another message. Rule 7 asterisk. Asterisk at 7:07 p.m. You must take the key and use it to unlock the door that appears. It will not be a door you've seen before. It may be in your home. It may be somewhere you've never been. It will find you. When you open it, do not speak. Do not react. Step inside, close the door behind you, and wait until the lights go out. You must leave something behind. Something alive. If you don't, you won't come back. Asterisk. I stared at the words, reading them again and again. Something alive. My mind raced. What did that even mean? A plant? A bug? A pet? I didn't have any pets. I didn't even have houseplants. The most alive thing in my apartment was me, and that wasn't something I could leave behind. Unless the rule didn't mean something else alive. Unless it meant, pardon me, I tried not to think about it. Instead, I spent the day on edge, checking every corner of my apartment, looking for anything strange, anything out of place. But everything looked the same. The rooms were still, the shadows quiet. The only thing that had changed was me. I felt stretched thin, fragile, like my soul was being peeled layer by layer with every rule I followed. 6:59 p.m. I stood in the hallway, clutching the black key in my hand. My heart was pounding. My ears were ringing. And then I heard it. A knock. 3 deliberate knocks, coming from the hallway closet. I turned my head slowly. There was a door there, but it wasn't my closet door. No, this was something entirely different. It hadn't been there yesterday. It hadn't been there this morning. A tall, narrow wooden door stood where the closet had been. Deep brown, with no doorknob, just a keyhole. And on its surface, carved into the wood, were the faint outlines of something writhing. Shapes, faces, hands. The key in my hand pulsed with cold. 7:07 p.m. The time had come. I stepped toward the door, heart hammering in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to burn the USB, to forget everything. But I knew better. The rules didn't let you run. You played the game, or you paid the price. I slid the key into the lock. It clicked. Clean. Final. The door creaked, opened slowly on its own. A rush of cold air spilled into the hall, carrying with it a scent I couldn't place. Rotten flowers and something ancient. Something dead. Without a word, I stepped inside, and the door shut behind me. The room beyond was impossible. I was standing in a long hallway that stretched far beyond the physical boundaries of my apartment. The walls were made of decaying wallpaper and cracked plaster. The floor creaked beneath my feet with every hesitant step. The ceiling was covered in hanging, buzzing light bulbs, each flickering softly, humming with uneasy energy. As I walked, I saw doors lining the hall, each one slightly open, each one revealing glimpses of scenes I couldn't explain. A woman weeping in a room full of broken mirrors, a child drawing symbols in blood on the walls, a man speaking to someone who wasn't there, whispering secrets to the void. Each scene was quiet. Each door pulsed with dread. I didn't stop walking. I couldn't. After what felt like forever, I reached the end of the hall. A final room. Its door was closed. I didn't need to knock. It opened for me. I stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, illuminated only by a single candle on a table in the center. Everything was still, quiet. I stood there, frozen, until a voice echoed from the shadows behind me. Soft, calm, ageless. You followed 6 rules. 1 remains. I didn't turn around. Leave something alive, it whispered. I opened my mouth to speak, but stopped. Don't speak, the rule had said. I scanned the room, searching for something, anything I could offer, but there was nothing. No animals, no insects, no signs of life, except me. And then I saw it. In the far corner of the room, something moved. A small cage. Inside it, a rat, brown, terrified, its eyes wide with panic. A gift? A test? I didn't know, but I knew what I had to do. I walked slowly toward the cage, opened it, and placed it on the floor in the center of the room, near the candle. The rat darted out, sniffing the air, alive. The room responded with silence. The candle flickered once, twice, then it went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I stood there in the pitch black, barely breathing. Then I heard the voice again. This time it was behind me. You've passed. The door creaked open. I stepped out, back into my hallway, back into my apartment. Except everything was slightly wrong. The light was a little dimmer, the walls a little closer, the air a little too still. I checked the clock. 7:11 p.m. Only 4 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. My phone buzzed. One final message. You followed Rule 7. You're safe, but the game isn't over. The origin of the USB. I stare at the final message on my phone, the words pulsing softly against the darkened screen. Asterisk, you followed Rule 7. You're safe, asterisk, but the game isn't over. Safe. The word had lost its meaning. After everything I had seen, things crawling in mirrors, doors that shouldn't exist, voices whispering through walls. Safety felt like a lie I told myself to keep from unraveling. I was alone in my apartment again. Or I hoped I was. The cursed USB drive still sat on my desk, right where I first plugged it in what felt like weeks ago. I hadn't dared remove it since the rules began. Somehow, I believed that pulling out would break the only fragile connection keeping me from slipping completely into whatever nightmare world had opened. But now, there were no more rules. And yet the message was clear. The game isn't over, which meant something worse was coming. I sat down in front of the USB, the red LED on its side blinking slowly, rhythmic, steady, like a heartbeat. I didn't remember it blinking before. Swallowing hard, I opened the folder again on my computer. The files looked the same. 7 short video files. Each one had unlocked after I completed a rule. Now there was an 8th. I hadn't completed 8 rules. I shouldn't have triggered another. But the file was there, untitled, just a blank icon. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, hesitant. Then I clicked. The video opened. Static, a wall of noise and flickering, distorted images. At first, I thought it was just corrupted. Maybe finally breaking down after all the torment. But then the static cleared, and a video began to play. A dimly lit room. An old one. Wooden walls. Dust hanging in the air like smoke. And in the center, a single chair. A man sat in it. His face was obscured by shadow, but I could see his hands. They were shaking. The camera angle was low, handheld, like someone was filming in secret from behind a door. The man in the chair spoke, his voice weak, hollow. They said if I followed the rules, I'd be free, he whispered. 7 rules. That's all. 7 things. I followed them. I did everything they asked. He looked directly at the camera, or through it. But the rules were never the game. The rules were the invitation. I felt my chest tighten. The man looked terrified, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. They use the rules to open you, he said, to soften you, to prepare you. You think you're playing by their rules, but every time you obey, they take a piece of you. He stood up slowly, swaying. Behind him, the shadows moved. Something long and tall and wrong unfolded from the corner of the room. I couldn't make out its shape, but I saw too many limbs, too many joints bending in the wrong direction. The man didn't turn around. He just kept speaking. I found a USB in a thrift store, he muttered, just lying there in a tray of junk. No label, no price, just waiting. He looked down at something in his hand. It was the same USB, the exact one. I try to warn people, but the drive, it spreads. It copies itself. Sometimes it mails itself. Sometimes it appears in coat pockets, in mailboxes, in second-hand stores. It wants to be found. He took a deep breath. And once it's found you, there's no going back. The thing in the corner reached out. I slammed the laptop shut. Silence. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding. So it had happened before. Others had played this game. Others had followed the rules. And they had seen what I was starting to see. I glanced back at the desk. The USB's red light was now blinking faster, as if it knew I had watched, as if it was excited. The air in the room shifted, not with movement, but with intent. I opened my phone, hoping to see a new message. Nothing. Then, slowly, a new folder appeared on my desktop. Welcome /_room. I opened it, hands trembling. Inside was one file. Readme /_first txt. I clicked it open. Congratulations. You followed all 7 rules. You survived. But you've also completed the unlocking. You are now ready to meet the ones behind the rules. Tonight, at exactly 3:33 a.m., a new door will appear. Do not resist. This is what you were chosen for. This is what you become. I closed the laptop. I could hear something behind the wall. Not in the wall. Behind it, the faint sound of something breathing. And then came the whisper. So faint, I wasn't sure if I imagined it. Welcome home. The architect of the game. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down. I sat in the living room. Phone clutched in one hand. The cursed USB still pulsing red from the desk like a warning signal no one else could see. Outside, the world was still. Not peaceful, just silent, a dead kind of quiet. Like the world knew what was coming at 3:33 a.m. and wanted no part of it. I kept watching the clock. Every second was a scream in my mind. 3:32 a.m. The air shifted again, this time violently. My ears popped. The lights in the room dimmed and didn't come back. The USB stopped blinking. I stood up, legs shaking, my entire body screaming for me to run. But where? Where do you run when the game doesn't follow space? When the rules are older than your blood? I turned slowly toward the hallway wall. And there it was. A new door. It didn't make sense. There was no space for it to exist, but it was there, wedged between the hallway and the bathroom. Jet black. No handle. No frame. Just a vertical slit in the wall, humming with dark energy, like the outline of a void waiting to be opened. Then it did. Not with a sound. Not with force. It simply was open. I didn't remember walking toward it, but I found myself standing before it. The cool draft flowing from the other side, licking at my skin like fingers. I stepped in, and the door sealed behind me. No sound, no seams, just gone. Darkness swallowed me whole. But this wasn't the kind of darkness you adjust to. This was ancient, alive, and then came the light. Faint at first, a glow that pulsed from beneath my feet, revealing the impossible room around me, a massive cathedral of twisted architecture, spirals that defied physics, walls that breathed, stained glass windows that pulsed with internal screams. The colors bled into each other, forming patterns that rearranged if I looked too long. In the center stood them, the architects. They weren't creatures. They weren't ghosts. They were functions. That's the only word that came to mind. They moved like algorithms given flesh. Perfectly synchronized shapes, long limbs folding and unfolding, skin that looked like moving static, constantly glitching. Their faces were blank but always shifting, sometimes human, sometimes insect, sometimes me. 7 figures, one for each rule. They surrounded me in a ring, not speaking, but flooding my mind with thought, images, memory, fear, and then words, not spoken, poured. "You were chosen because you followed," said the one closest to me. Its voice echoed not in my ears but in my bones. "You obeyed the logic. You became part of the sequence." What sequence? I whispered before I could stop myself. They responded not with words, but with understanding. The USB was never cursed. It was coded, a sequence that mirrored a kind of ritualistic algorithm, one that opened gateways to hidden layers of reality, realities built beneath the surface of this one, places that existed before time, sealed away by ancient minds who feared their creators. The rules weren't arbitrary. They were a boot sequence, and I had just finished executing it. "You are now the vessel," another one said, slithering closer, its body folding like paper. "You've hollowed yourself with obedience. Made room. Prepared the container." My skin crawled. "No," I said. "No, I didn't agree to anything. I followed the rules to survive." "To survive! You opened the door," said another, flickering with my mother's voice. That was consent. They moved closer. All 7, surrounding me again. "Your reality is the layer we now enter. You brought us through, just as the one before you did, and the one before them." I realized what they meant. The man in the chair from the video. He followed the rules too. He unlocked the door, just like I had. And now, backslash, it was my turn to take his place. "To stop it," I said, desperate, "I'll destroy the USB." A pause. Then laughter. Not sound, madness. The kind of laughter that rearranged thought, that carved symbols into the folds of your brain. "The USB is not the code," they said together. "It is the invitation. The code runs now through you." Then they stepped back, the floor beneath me glowing brighter. "You are the new carrier," they said. "You will spread us. Through rules. Through whispers. Through files left behind." The floor cracked. The ceiling splintered open to reveal an endless red void above. And then asterisk asterisk a scream. Asterisk asterisk. Mine, being pulled upward, torn into a million data points, fragmented and uploaded. I woke up in my apartment, on the floor, sweating, shaking. The USB gone from the desk. The laptop wiped clean. Just one file remained. Spread backslash underscore, the backslash underscore word DXE. No icons, no messages. But I already knew what it would do. And I knew the rules now, too. All 7, because they were inside me. And someone else would find the file, open it, click it, and it would begin again. The next player enters. A week passed. I didn't leave the apartment. Couldn't. Not after what happened. I'd sit in silence for hours, lights off, curtains drawn, flinching at every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of the power. The sound of hard drive spinning made me nauseous. My reflection looked off, like I wasn't completely back, like part of me was still in there, in that place, but the file remained. Spread backslash underscore, the backslash underscore word EXE, just sitting there. No icon, no size, no date, modified. It taunted me. I didn't open it. I wouldn't. I already knew what it contained. A replication of the curse. A perfectly constructed virus of thought, designed to travel not just through code, but through obedience. The rules. That was how it spread. Whoever followed them unlocked the door. And when they unlocked it, they let them in. Then, one morning, my email pinged. I hadn't used that address in years. It was an old account, tied to nothing, one I kept only for spam and junk registrations. But the message stood out immediately. No subject, no sender, just one attachment. Rule \_1 txt. My stomach sank. I opened it. Rule 1 asterisk. Asterisk, you must forward this file to exactly 3 people within the next 13 minutes. If you don't, they'll send someone to remind you, and you won't survive the second reminder. Asterisk. I stared at the screen. The countdown had already begun in the bottom right of my monitor. 12:17, 12:16, 12:15, asterisk, asterisk. A chill slid down my spine. They weren't done with me. I was the carrier now. I didn't spread the curse. Asterisk, I was a curse star. The USB wasn't needed anymore. The file had evolved. It moved through networks now, through subconscious triggers, through fear and curiosity and human compliance. The screen flickered once. And then something new, a webcam feed, mine, a live image of me sitting at my desk, staring at myself through my own screen. I hadn't turned the camera on, and yet here I was, blinking, shaking. Behind me in the feed, something moved, slowly, something tall, slender, skin like static. I whipped around. Nothing. When I turned back, the video feed was gone, and a new file appeared. Recipient \_1.txt. I didn't want to know, but I opened it. It listed a name, an email, a location, someone I knew, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, someone I trusted. The game wasn't mine anymore. It was growing. The rules weren't just survival instructions. They were a virus, a sequence of obedience that opened the world, one terrified player at a time. And like a chain letter from hell, it would never stop, because you might be next. All it takes is one click, and the game begins again.